The colossally huge hit of Attack on Titan has finally reached its dramatic conclusion, and to say that people reacted to the definitive ending of a beloved series filled with so many controversies and very dark subject matter went about as well as you can imagine. A reaction so vitriolic that Isayama had to publish additional pages to the final volume to try and salvage it. Well, I for one enjoyed it and think that the last few pages give the story the kind of bittersweet, ambiguous conclusion it really needed. There is one panel so terrible, so aggressively awful that I think it almost destroys the entire series. A panel so terrible it makes me second guess Isayama's judgment as a storyteller and how wonderfully uncomfortable it made me feel. So while this hot take might be coming months late because I'm sorry, I got a day job and I can't pump out YouTube videos to hit all the hot button trends when they hit, like other people who do this shit full time, I want to examine the one element that I don't think has gotten nearly as much shit as it deserves. So of course, spoilers abound, so don't watch this video if you care about being spoiled for Attack on Titan's ending if you're just following the anime. But if you already know what I'm talking about, or just don't really care about spoilers, keep watching as we get into and break down the one panel that nearly ruined Attack on Titan's ending. So Attack on Titan concluded with its 139th chapter in April of 2021, and just to recap and refresh your memory of what was happening in the great conclusion, friends and enemies are forced to join together to save the world, including the Eldians of Paradise Island and the Warriors of Marley, after Eren Yeager unleashes the power of the Rumbling to flatten everyone outside of the Island of Paradise in a genocidal campaign to save his fellow Waldians from the persecution by the rest of the world. Because, as the Eren Yeager meme repeated on all comment sections says, you can't be racist if there aren't any other races. Eren proceeds to destroy the world's military using the thousands of colossal titans under his command to trample all over the huddled masses seeking refuge, becoming the worst monster in the history of his universe. A final solution that will make the worst dictators of our world blush with envy. The combined allied forces are eventually able to subdue and kill Eren thanks to Mikasa going into his colossal titan skull, beheading his severed head that is attached to the spine of his titan, bringing about peace and an end to the Age of Titans. The curse of Titans is lifted from the world and the survivors are left to rebuild. The former Titan shifters of Paradise and Marley come together as ambassadors, looking to somehow heal the deep division and fresh wounds so mankind can build into a new tomorrow, free from the terror of Titans and the innate prejudice towards the Eldian people. Not a terrible ending, at least not on paper, but many people had a few issues with it, like Eren's awkward outburst where he demands Mikasa only love him for the rest of her life and never be with anyone else, Armin thanking Eren for becoming a genocidal monster for their sake, and of course the infamous bird scarf scene, where Eren, seemingly reincarnated as a dove of freedom, comes back to put the scarf on Mikasa one last time. While all these are not perfect story elements, at least they kind of make an awkward sort of sense. I like Eren devolving into a selfish little teenager in his final moment, proclaiming like a stubborn child that he wishes Mikasa can never love anyone else besides him. It's one of the few moments, especially after the time jump, where Eren doesn't feel like an edgelord revolutionary, but like an actual young adult teenager. He's mostly been focused on revenge and anger throughout the entire series, so I like that we get something so awkward, humanizing, and extremely selfish. Armin thanking him for becoming a mass murderer is awkward, but the sentiment is, hey, at least he became a monster for the sake of protecting your friends. I guess if you're gonna kill 80% of the world's population, keeping your friends safe is a betterish reason for the genocide. Maybe the world would look kinder upon the horrible acts committed by Hitler, Stalin, and Mao if only we knew it was all for the sake of saving their foppish blonde best friend and an adopted but not biologically related sister. The bird is just kind of dumb, but there's no way to call it anything else. It's an attempt to try and have a bittersweet, sentimental send-off to what's been a pretty dark and brutal story, to imply that somehow Eren's quest for freedom saw him reincarnating into a feathered form so he could wrap Mikasa's scarf around her one more time as a form of thanks. Is an attempt to try and give her some kind of comfort and reprieve. But honestly, the whole Eren-Mikasa romance is one that the series has kept on the sidelines, and that's one thing I think has been for the better, given the fact that while not biologically related, their relationship has been based around the fact that they are basically adopted siblings. And anime already has far too many incest pairings to really sell this as something that we, the audience, should be rooting for. Outside of the realms of creepy fanfiction and fan art. The real egregious panel comes from the chapter just before the final one in 138. And it's this panel where we see the great progenitor of the Titan powers and great ancestor of all the LDN people looking on in positive affirmation and smiling warmly as Mikasa makes out with the decapitated head of Eren. A panel so terribly executed and uncomfortably awkward it almost transforms into a piece of Baroque comedy. It casts Mikasa as a deranged yandere lover so obsessed with affection for her unrequited genocidal brother that even after lopping off his head, she couldn't help but making out with the decapitated remains as some kind of final coda for her unhealthy obsession. What makes it even more uncomfortable is the visage of her great-great ancestor looking on in approval like the trashiest Fujoshi fangirl, seeing her filthiest fetish fantasy come out to play in real life. The panel is as terrible and uncomfortable as that. I've seen a few defenses of it. The best I've seen came from the YouTuber Totally Not Mark.
Pointed out. Isayama even goes as far as to create a direct parallel with King Fritz saying to Ymir in an earlier chapter, "Ymir, my slave," and Eren repeating to Mikasa in their confrontation, "You're a slave, Mikasa." Both shackled slaves to love, Ymir's choice in Mikasa is both understandable and pivotal in the events that follow. As Ymir watches Mikasa's actions over the course of the narrative, her understanding of their shared perspective on love grows stronger, and in those final moments as Mikasa casts aside her love for Eren to do the right thing in putting him to death, behind her stands none other than Ymir, a smile on her face as she realizes that if Mikasa could shed her love for the greater good, then perhaps she could too. And that is precisely what she does, eradicating the Titans and setting the Eldians free.
He asserts that the reason why Ymir looks on to Mikasa's necrophilia with such approval is that Ymir sees Mikasa breaking her bond of affection and love with Eren for the greater good of the world, and that Ymir still loved her horrible abuser, King Fritz. And it was that love that kept her attached to the world, eternally building Titans for her descendants, and ensuring that the terror of the Titans would remain a constant presence in the world of man. And that seeing Mikasa renounce her love showed her that she could do the same and thus eliminate the terror of Titans from the world forever, which is an interesting idea in practice, but okay, so here's how the page would need to be laid out to make that interpretation work. Mikasa enters the jaw of Eren's colossal titan, she kisses his weird head spine thing, then she decapitates it as Ymir looks on in approval. This better illustrates that Mikasa finally gets to display her affection for Eren in a physical capacity before she makes the resignation to kill him and save the world. Ymir gives her nodding approval to the decapitation, and not the weird necrophiliac kiss. It's still weird, but it's a lot less off-putting and confusing. Endings are always a tricky thing. Game of Thrones was one of the biggest TV series across the globe, a huge sensation the world had never seen, but the awful, rushed, and lazy final season was so badly received that it retroactively smeared the perception of the show. It recently had its 10-year anniversary celebration, and the larger world could not give a shit about it, to the point where there is next to no hype or excitement for the numerous spin-offs currently in development at HBO. The same thing could be said for Lost, a TV series that, along with The Sopranos, ushered in the golden era of scripted dramas, along with the rise of genre entertainment. But the ending was so cryptic, vague, and unsatisfying that no one seems to remember it fondly, despite it becoming a cornerstone of pop culture in the mid-2000s. The end is the culmination of the journey. It offers closure and answers, and also defines what a series' legacy will ultimately be. The first reaction towards Attack on Titan's ending was, for the most part, pretty negative, for the aforementioned reasons, and for the most part, I'd agree with the criticisms. Something that had been this sweeping of a story needed a greater sense of closure, especially after how much of the world had been fractured after its conclusion. Luckily for Isayama, he was able to include a few extra pages that would be published in the final volume release. And it's these pages that I think saved the ending entirely. Attack on Titan is a bitter mean series that grows beyond being a steampunk thriller about teenagers who fight kaiju zombie monsters for the fate of humanity. Titans are merely a tool. As we come to learn, they are tools used for persecution equally by the Eldian Empire and the country of Marley. They are tools of persecution, resources to be controlled, and the greatest horror isn't being crushed or eaten. The true horror at the core of Attack on Titan is man's own inhumanity towards itself, and how these grievances and prejudices and attempts to control others can come to affect the larger scale of history and culture. Is it ever possible to move beyond feelings of vindictive violence and anger and a desire towards vengeance and war to instead create peace and find freedom? Or are we eternally forced to struggle to fight and survive against a cruel, merciless, uncaring world that moves beyond our designs as individuals? We have numerous instances in our own real world of these forever wars, like the Israel and Palestinian conflicts, that just feel like they go on for eons without any sign of peace coming to fruition in the future. For most of my adult life, it feels like there's 3 to 4 year cycles where I read some kind of news story about Palestinian suicide bombing an Israeli cafe, or Israeli troops bombing a Palestinian farmstead and seizing the land, with dozens of heads speaking about it, but then it gets brushed off only for the same thing to keep happening as time marches forward. The times change, but the story doesn't. Attack on Titan needed to address this, and what would the future world look like after Eren's genocide, and the additional pages gives us a glimpse of that legacy. We see Mikasa going up to the tree she'd always visit, laying a flower in tribute to Eren. She does eventually move on from him, marrying what looks like Jean, as she starts a life and family. Around here, we see the eras advance. The isolated island of Paradis welcomes new technology, becomes a thriving metropolis. Mikasa grows older, still continuing to visit the grave of her unrequited lover and symbolic brother. And eventually she passes away too. The cityscapes grow into skyscrapers, and the tree is protected with missile batteries as we see the world's aggression come back, seeking vengeance on Paradis Island. The trauma of trying to genocide the rest of the world is a grievance that is not forgotten. We don't know the story of why Paradis is being bombed, but it's not hard to infer what happened given the festering tales of the beast of Eren Yeager, still lingering in the history books. The Eldian devil, the monster of Eldia's wrath coming to snuff out the world, would lead to an anger that would never go away. And so the nation of Paradis is demolished in a world war we never see, but amidst those ruins we see a small boy, a great descendant of Mikasa, being beckoned into the hollow stump of the tree, attracted by a hole with the same siren's call of power that brought his great ancestor Ymir, and created the strife through the terror of Titans. That is the bittersweet ending Attack on Titan needed, because war changes one mostly for the worse. All 3 of our heroes were twisted through the conflict of Titans to become mockeries of their original purpose. Eren, the one who sought freedom above all else, became a slave of causality, living in a time loop he couldn't break out of, forcing himself to become the monster people thought he was, using the powers of his Attack Titan to influence events present and past, even to the point where he came to the horrible realization that he was the one who'd sent the Titan of Dina Fritz to consume his own mother just to protect the thread of causality that he believed would lead towards his friend's salvation. The one who wanted to be the freest of all was actually the one who was imprisoned by the machinations of fate and causality, a prison of his own making. Armin, the ultimate negotiator, who always tried to talk his way out and find a common understanding, became a weapon of mass destruction responsible for the obliteration of countless innocent lives, a literal walking personification of Hiroshima, and a failure to find a means to achieve anything through diplomacy. Mikasa, the great protector, the most skilled warrior of the Ackerman clan, became an executioner, beheading the person who was always dearest to her. No one gets away clean, everyone is burnt and scarred in the fires of the Eldian Ragnarok that nearly obliterates the world. This is the ending we needed, and the final pages with their coda make things much better. And they also set up the sequel for the live-action Attack on Titan movies, which take place in the bombed-out post-apocalyptic world like the one seen in the extra pages of the finale. See, Isayama's a true genius, connecting his work to the terrible live-action spin-off that nobody liked. That's when you really know you're a next-level creator. But in all seriousness, it'll be interesting to see how this ending is adapted by MAPPA and how it'll be received by the wider community once we reach the bleak conclusion that we've always been slowly walking towards, and how people outside of the manga world react to the ending of Attack on Titan. It has been a colossal journey, and one that is not perfect, but one that has managed to resonate and grow with an entire generation. And I look forward to Isayama's next work, or the hot spring sauna he's supposedly going to open up, and has been secretly marketing by describing the sensation of stepping out of a Titan as coming out of a piping hot sauna. Truly, the man is a genius beyond words. Hope you enjoyed that video. A special thank you to Kane Pixel, whose amazing Attack on Titan animations I liberally borrowed and sprinkled throughout this video. I included a link towards his YouTube channel. You can check out the full videos there. I highly recommend them. I think they're excellent. And I also included a link to the Armin Colossal Titan animation so you can see the original version of that as well. A special thank you to all the radical Jaegerists who support my channel and fund me outside of the measly YouTube Google AdSense rations I get on my little algorithm-deprived Eldian ghetto by Marley. YouTube. These are the Eldian restorationists who plot for the restoration of the great Eldian Empire. Eric Duhane, Shonen Ronin, Bari, Walking the Steps, Carla Hoffman, Aaron Tony, and Joseph Malty. Anyone is welcome to join us as we plot to overthrow and take over Jake Paul and Hassan Abi's mansion and seize power. Come and join these brave heroes. And thanks for watching. See you whenever I make my next video.